Certain barks have some properties that make them very useful as a fuel for certain things. For one thing, they can have a very high fuel value. It burns for a long time and it puts out a lot of heat over that time that it's burning. It forms kind of a cast of ash over the outside. So you know how barbecue briquettes press carbonized sawdust and coal or something? They do this thing where as they burn, they form this layer of thick ash that doesn't change shape and it just stays there. And what that does is two things. It slows the burning down so the heat lasts longer. It spreads the heat out and it moderates the heat and makes an even heat. Rather than like you have a hot point here and a hot point here and a hot point here, the ash kind of makes it all a little bit more even. And this does exactly that. This is like nature's charcoal briquette, or you might say, you know, the opposite, that charcoal briquettes are artificial bark. So around here, there's two barks that I know of that are the best barks. I've used different species of oaks, like for instance the tan oak that I use for tanning a lot, but it just isn't as good as this bark, for instance, which is black oak bark. So California black oak, Quercus kalagii, and coast live oak, Quercus agrifolia. And that one has the thickest, heaviest, consistently thickest, heaviest bark I know. Like even a small tree will have this really thick bark on it, and it's just awesome stuff. I used to use that when I lived where it grew, but it doesn't grow this far inland. Now I'm sure there's other oak barks that will work, and I have used other ones, but I can't really recall which ones, but most of them are thin, right? So this is a problem. The black oak trees are thick on the really big trees like this. Like this is just a limb off of a huge tree that's probably in the thickest area of that tree. It's 3.5 to 4 feet thick. The bark on the base of that tree is probably, you know, 1.5 inches thick or something. So there's some interesting things I can tell you about this. Flavor-wise for barbecuing, it just has an excellent, interesting, unique flavor. I know a guy, I mean, he's probably passed away by now. If not, he's well over 100. His name's Ray Harden from Central California. He came from an old ranching family, I think at least 3 generations of ranchers down there in Central California. And we were talking about it one day, and he's like, oh yeah, that's all we use for barbecue. So their family barbecue tradition is to use oak bark. So I started smoking bacon with it, and it works really, really well for smoking bacon. It has a low tendency to flare and catch on fire, and you know, because you don't want flames, you just want it to kind of burn real slow. I've smoked with a lot of different materials, like a lot of different woods for smoking meat, and they all have, when it first comes off, it just has this kind of harsh, edgy taste. Over time, it just mellows out and gets better and better. For whatever reason, this doesn't do that, and it just has a nice, mellow flavor right out of the gate. So that's super cool too. I've also ran across a couple of really interesting accounts from California Indians about using this. You know, every area of the world and every like traditional people have these cool little technologies and traditions and stuff that they do, and this is one from California. A lot of people probably already know that California Indians cook in baskets. You heat up rocks really hot. You put the liquid in there, and then you take the hot rocks out, rinse them quickly, drop them in, and because the basket is full of water, it doesn't burn the basket. Like if you took a really red hot rock and just drop it straight in there and leave it, that's probably not a great idea. But what you do is you drop them in and you just stir them. You don't have to like panic stir them or anything like that. It works. It's super cool, and it boils very, very fast. But another way that baskets were used for cooking was to toast things. Say if you were toasting seeds, which is a real common food in California. Anyone that thinks that primitive people, like that stupid paleo diet thing where like people didn't eat carbohydrates, anyone who had access to any carbohydrate ate it, and in a lot of cases that was a lot of carbohydrate. In California, that was the staple. The staples were acorns and seeds. Anyway, side note, rant. So a lot of the seeds need to be toasted, either probably just for flavor, but also to process. So like if you have a grass seed with a hull that's like pretty firmly attached, you need to like toast that and dry it or even burn it off. So the way we do that in a basket is to take oak bark or other hot coals. It doesn't have to be oak bark, it's just that they're really good because they hold together well, and again, they have a high fuel value. And you take those, you know, knock the ash off, toss them in a basket full of seeds, like a flat tray, and then you just work it and keep it moving constantly. And if it moves constantly, it just cooks and toasts the seeds without burning the basket. But you have to like be on top of it. I mean, you have to move it constantly. Another cool account I read about was before going to sleep, you'd make a small fire of oak bark at your feet and at your head. and you'd sleep in between these two fires to stay warm because it burns for so long because of that ash cast. The more ash it forms, the slower it burns. So it kind of burns quickly at first, and then it just starts to slow down. So every time a big tree like this falls down that has this nice thick bark, I try to put up a tub or two of it to just have around. Just this limb alone has produced, like, you know, there's like 3 big piles of bark here that I can make use of. The ash is really useful. I mean, you can use it for tanning and soap making, and I scrub pots with it, all kinds of stuff. But it's great for agriculture too. I would guess that this has a much higher mineral content, like useful mineral content, than the wood itself. And for instance, I know that black oak leaves are supposed to contain a lot of calcium, like especially high amount of calcium. So I would guess that, you know, maybe the bark contains a lot of calcium. But whatever the case, any wood ash is useful in this environment where the soil is acidic. Like, I can't imagine having too much ash to spread around my property and make it grow better. And of course, you can just use it as mulch, and it's particularly useful for mulch because it's already in flat sheets and plates, so it helps to suppress weed growth, and you can kind of like layer it in a thick layer or a couple layers. I mean, I could really mulch a tree really thickly with all of this bark, and it would last for years, and then it's slowly feeding the soil over time. And of course, everyone's heard me talk about tanning with bark. So with oak bark, you know, I use it for tanning, but you have to get it before it gets weathered and rained on. So you probably don't live in the same area that I live in or have the same resources that I do, but keep an eye on your different tree barks and just try burning them. If you have some, throw them in the fire and see what they do. You might be surprised at how awesome they are. I really value this stuff highly. It has very unique properties that no other wood stuff around here has, and I put that to good use. I think most people around here call these bark scorpions. They live under bark. In a log like this, like, it's predictable you're going to find at least one. They're actually pretty big. This isn't a huge one here. I'll just put my finger for size reference. So this is most of the bark from this one large limb, which is, you know, granted the size of a lot of medium-sized trees, but it's a lot of bark. You know, everyone's into hugelkultur now, so you need sources of carbon for that. This would be great, because I could use it to burn lime. And I'll grate out like the heaviest, densest, least rotten in a tub to burn for barbecuing and foraging and stuff like that. And the rest of it I'll probably put on some trees. I'm starting a walnut tree from seed to try to grow like a new variety. I think I'll mulch that with this stuff probably. Watch this.